This is actually the first time I'm meeting you face to face. I first got to know you because a mutual friend, tagged me on Facebook and said I definitely need to talk to you about adult ADHD.
Okay.
Right, which is a thing that I found it was such a provocative idea that someone out there was trying to let everyone know adult ADHD is a thing and that you discover along the way. So maybe you could share your experience of how did you even get into this advocacy about ADHD?
I think it all starts with a lived experience.
Yeah.
In my case, my daughter was diagnosed when she was 15 years old. She was struggling in school. So as a desperate Singapore parent, the year before O-levels, you just do everything you can to help. And once we receive the diagnosis, the next thing, of course, is to find out more about it so that we can, give her what she needs.
Yeah.
And, we realized as I was reading more about it, that actually it's a genetic element. But at that stage, I was 50. Okay. So, I think the thinking was, I've gotten this far without a formal diagnosis. Do I really need one?
But did you always suspect you had it?
Actually, no. Just because, the impression I always had was that it was mainly small boys, right?
Yeah.
That's quite irrelevant to me or my daughter.
Okay.
So that's why it didn't really, connect with me.
Right.
But once she had that diagnosis and I was finding out more, and then I realized about the genetic element, I thought, okay, maybe. But then again, there was no urgency in that sense. She was a priority, her exams.
Yeah.
But around the time of O-levels, I was really overwhelmed, over commitments in my life. I tend to do that.
Yeah.
And my reason for actually trying to get a diagnosis is because a good friend of mine had recently had his diagnosis as an adult. And he said that, being able to take medication and having that clarity of his condition helped him focus much better.
Yeah.
And I was desperate to squeeze every single minute of productivity because I was so overwhelmed. So I actually was medication seeking, I think, initially. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why I went for a diagnosis.
Yeah.
But after getting the diagnosis, actually what surprised me was that it wasn't so much that I became so super productive, but it was more of the self-understanding, the self-compassion, the acceptance. And I think even more bigger in terms of the impact in my life was the relationship side, because when I shared with my husband, I think he saw more context as to the past, some of the things that we went through. And I think he became more compassionate. So I think ultimately it helped in my relationship with him and in my own understanding and self-acceptance.
Okay. So if I had to slow it down for someone who's listening to this for the first time and very unfamiliar with what is ADHD, could you spell it out for us? What is ADHD and what would be the top telltale signs for an adult who's listening that might be wondering, do I have it? Yeah.
Okay, going on the established criteria, for ADHD, there are two main kinds of presentations. The first one is known as a predominantly hyperactive impulsive.
Yeah.
Okay, we always associate it with little boys bouncing off walls. I happen to be a girl with a hyperactivity type of component. Yeah. So it's basically as if there's an engine inside you that won't stop running. Very little breaks, in that sense. So tending to interrupt people, being impatient, fidgety, whether it's physically or inside in your mind.
Yeah.
Always jumping from one thing to another.
Yeah.
The other kind of very common presentation is the predominantly inattentive.
Same old.
Yes. And this, I think, affects more women and girls. And it's actually quite hard for boys who also happen to have this more. And it's those who really struggle with attention to detail.
Okay.
Okay, very much easily distracted and a feeling of overwhelm to be able to get things done on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So that's a lot tougher. And my daughter has the second type. Yeah. And I'm more the first type. Okay. So there's sometimes night and day. And there's a big component of people who actually have both. The combination type, yeah.
Ah, okay. So how would someone tell the difference between, well, maybe I'm just distractible, maybe I just have struggles focusing, maybe I'm just not very attentive to detail. So what makes someone, say, have a diagnosable, you have ADHD versus you're just a average?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people might have heard the phrase, aren't we all a little bit ADHD anyway?
Yeah.
And that's a very common thing. And actually the traits of ADHD are not exclusive to those with ADHD.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why a lot of people identify with it. The difference between a trait and what they call something clinically indicated would be in terms of the persistency, okay, over a period of time, and the impairment or the effect in more than one area of one's life.
Right.
So let's say in a child or a young person, it could be maybe the academic, but it could also be at home or the relationships, right? So there'd be other impairments or other things that would have the negative effect. That's one. And also the fact of that for adults, they look at when it first began surfacing in one's life. And usually at this point in time is before age 12. So that's why when you go for a diagnosis, usually they will ask for your report books or to bring a family member who has known you since you were a child to corroborate. Yeah.
So like, is it possible to, because like your field of work is, I mean, what at least I know most about your field of work is these adults who discover that like very late in life. So is it that they are so high functioning and it wasn't a thing for them and now they know it's a thing? Like,
I think it's a combination of many factors. I think there was a saying that says, if you've met one ADHD-er, you've met one ADHD-er. Okay. That's how different we all are in terms of presentation and wiring. Because there's so many factors, right? The home environment, maybe past trauma, your own, let's say, God-given IQ, right? Or coping mechanisms. So it's really hard to generalize. I think many people that are discovering that they have ADHD later in life, I've seen two broad groups basically, and two extremes. You know, talk about the bell curve, right? At one end of the bell curve is what we call the twice exceptionals, or 2E for short. These are folks that maybe, whether it's through IQ or through a certain giftedness, whether it's in creativity or sports or another aspect of life, have managed to compensate for it.
Right.
Okay, so they've managed to make it through life and connect with their strengths and outperform. So they're actually doing well. Yet they still struggle inside. But they're not sure why. So, one of my friends is like overclocking, can you imagine sort of like the overheating from having a accelerator and the brake all at the same time? But you're still performing. Okay. The other extreme, right, are people that are really struggling because they don't have support systems, they don't have the knowledge, or financial, or have a tougher environment. And we do know as much as 20% of the prison population in other countries have ADHD.
Wow.
Okay, so you're seeing the two extremes and people in between.
So you mentioned like there's this like internal struggle. That means even if I am high functioning or look like I'm really excelling in my life, there could be all these like things going on in me. So maybe open up the window a little bit for those of us who don't know what does the internal struggle of someone with ADHD sound like? What are the kind of questions or wonderings they have about themselves and the world?
Okay, that's a very interesting question because we do know from our research, ADHD rarely travels alone.
What's that mean?
It's basically if you're pure ADHD-er, that's the exception rather than the norm.
Oh, wow.
So there's something called comorbidity or coexisting conditions, and the most common mental health side is actually anxiety and depression. Okay, and on the learning side, it would be like dyslexia, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, like the social skills part,
right?
The rigidity in thinking. So those things actually impact on a person with ADHD. You've heard the term special education needs, right? SEN. So the holy trinity: ADHD, ASD, dyslexia. Some people have all three. Some people have two. Okay, so we struggle with things like that. So, and there's some information from the US that says that by the time the ADHD child is 10, they've heard about 20,000 negative feedback. Think about what that kind of thing does when you're an adult.
And what are the most known negative feedback that a kid with ADHD would get? That they actually don't deserve, but they get it.
I think one of the common ones is lazy.
Okay.
Someone being so lazy that they're not motivated, they don't bother trying. Another one is really being stupid because being slow, right? Or being naughty, especially for boys. Without much of an understanding of what's going on under the trunk of the car or under the hood rather of the car. So that's sort of a thing that we all struggle with. I think there's a sense of lack of self-worth. Lack of self-esteem. I mean, imposter syndrome is a common term that we all use now, right? But it's also very, very common for people with ADHD. That we have such a low sense of self. We're not sure whether we deserve whatever we're getting if it's good, that we qualify for it. Maybe it's just by fluke,
Yeah.
So I struggle with it all the time too.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's those things, the worry sometimes that keep on playing in our mind.
Okay.
And that's where the anxiety comes in, right? The rumination.
Right.
So it's really knowing that these exist, being mindful of it, and then how do you be intentional in addressing these, right? Yeah.
So what are some myths or barriers that can get in the way of someone actually seeking help for ADHD?
I think, let's say, if you're looking at adults in particular,
Yeah.
right? One of the common ones would be, for example, at my age, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I'm not studying, I don't need a formal diagnosis. I've been managing life. Why do I need to get diagnosed, right?
Yeah.
And that was a common one, even that I went through.
Yes.
And when I had a chat with my husband recently, you know what he said? He said, for goodness sake, even if you don't feel like you need help, what about people around you? Okay. And I wasn't exactly pleased, but, I could see his point, Sometimes we may think we're okay.
Yeah.
But that's in our own kind of perception, right?
Yeah.
What about those around us? So I thought that was a good one. If you don't do it for yourself, what about people around you?
Yeah.
As one of the reasons to go for a diagnosis. The other one is, if we're doing well at this stage, or we think we're doing well, and yet we're struggling so hard, right? What if it could be easier? What if we haven't fully unlocked our potential?
So is that why your group is called Unlocking ADHD?
Yes, in a way it is. Yes, it's to unlock the potential. Yeah, so there's so many ways to find excuses, right? Not to address something. And I don't think there'll ever be a perfect answer for every reason. So it's really the individual circumstances. Yeah.
So when you look at ADHD, do you see it as a kind of strength that people can bring to the table and not a weakness?
I think it has aspects of both.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's fully all strengths because there are areas of challenge. But again, I think in the past we tend to focus more on the deficits.
Yeah.
Okay. And what Unlocking ADHD is trying to do is really focus on the strengths. Because we know that the wiring of the ADHD-er is very much interest and novelty based, not priority based, like neurotypicals, or rather those who don't have ADHD. So it's really to connect with the areas of interest and the areas of strength.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the simple ways that you and Unlocking ADHD do to help someone with ADHD like get a sense of their potential and their strengths?
I think the first thing really comes from clarity.
Okay.
I think you got to start really at the basic, the foundation, right? Which is awareness.
Yeah.
So we found that actually in terms of awareness, it's not very high in Singapore. We know the prevalence rate is about 5% or higher.
Yeah.
Yet the support systems are not really there. Right now, the main support is in the school system.
Okay.
Okay, but once someone has finished the school years, right? Then what happens in the transition years? What happens in the workforce?
Yeah.
Right. So that's why we're looking at more of youth and adults for Unlocking ADHD. So again, awareness. So one of the things that we've done recently, and we just launched this, right?
Yeah.
And this is the Restart.
Yeah.
It's a starter kit for adults and for youth. Okay. And in the first chapter, there's actually a self-assessment. Okay. So people can do that. And if they happen to score high on it, print it out, bring it to see the psychiatrist or the psychologist.
Yeah.
This helps frame the conversation, right? Because in the past, people didn't know what to do, where to go, who to see, and what to say.
Yeah.
So this is the first step, okay? And then if there's clarity, if let's say there is a diagnosis that's confirmed, next step, what do you want to do with it? We have it all here. It's like a roadmap.
If you're wondering, you don't have to wonder anymore. Just like hit that link and then like just do a little bit of a self-check-in. Like, do you have it or not?
Yeah, the reason why we're doing this is because early on when we were doing our engagements with the different ministries, we actually spoke with IMH.
Okay.
Okay, and Professor Daniel Fang, the CEO, actually enlightened us that in Singapore, based on our population, we need over 600 psychiatrists. We only have about, I think, 270 or so. So it's not going to change overnight.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no point ranting about that.
Yes.
So the question is, what can we do? And he said the key is ADHD literacy, awareness.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. Because when there's more awareness, more literate people, they know what are the things they could do to self-help.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at how can you do peer helping each other, right? So growing the capability of community.
Yeah.
And of course, working with those who are the professionals, right? The mental health professionals.
And I'm going to slow you down with that stat again of like when you say like in Singapore we need 600
plus, yeah.
600 plus like psychiatrists. We only have about 270. Is this for ADHD alone or for everything in general?
Everything.
Okay. So we're slowing that down so that you all can hear these people. We need about 600. We only have about 270, and that number ain't gonna change overnight.
Yes.
Right. So I love that you've put that on the table because it's not just an ADHD thing. And the need for not just peer-to-peer support and not just an NGO trying to support like people who have whatever it is that we're talking about. It's like how can workplaces and marriages and friendships and community groups, how can all of us like be a part of this solution rather than like,
yes.
where are all the psychiatrists?
Exactly.
They're not going to come out tomorrow, you know? Yeah, and even if they did, you still need the support.
Exactly. So, I used to call it the execution gap because, people can make the appointment, see the psychiatrist or see the psychologist for therapy.
Yeah.
But in between, what do you do? So we used to use the analogy of seeing a physiotherapist.
Yes.
You see the physiotherapist, he or she will show you all the exercises and stretches to do. Expectations, you go home and practice it.
Yeah.
Then appointment number 2 is when you move on to the next step.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of this. I'm sure many people are. How many of us actually go back and religiously do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very few. Right?
Yeah.
So when the time we go back again, we're almost back to square one.
Yeah.
But worse still, passage of time, right?
Yeah.
Money, right?
Yeah.
So it can be quite discouraging, particularly when it's a mental health issue.
Yeah.
So there needs to be something to fill in that gap in between the appointments.
Yeah.
Someone to come alongside in a way to coach, to mentor, to journey together.
Yeah.
And in a very sustainable way because we can't always be paying the fees, right?
Yeah.
So that's where community comes in. And that's what we are trying to do.
We're definitely going to lean a bit on like what can the system and the community and the workplace do. I want to like sort of close up this first set of questions, which are around like how can an individual help themselves, so aside from like getting clearer on whether you have, don't have, and informing the people in your life that you do, there was a line that you said in our pre-conversation to prep for this podcast, and you said ADHD is an explanation, it's not an excuse. Could you unpack that for someone who's listening who might be struggling with ADHD? Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's actually a very fine line because it could look at the same, right?
Yeah.
How you frame it.
Yeah.
But when we say it's an explanation, it's to give context onto why a person has been maybe struggling with certain symptoms in their life, whether it's workplace or home. It's to give the person listening and also for themselves to understand that.
Yeah.
But we're saying it's not an excuse because you shouldn't use that to say as a crutch or as a defense to say that's why I'm like that, accept me. And I'm not going to do anything to change.
Yeah.
Okay, that is not something that should be used that way. That's an abuse, of the condition.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way I see it, I won't say just me alone, but many in our community, is that we want the understanding and the compassion, the support.
Yeah.
But we're saying that, we ourselves also need to, take ownership. Okay? And basically have the agency to do something about it. So it's also honest.
Yeah.
To do something, to just make ourselves a better version of ourselves. Not to say that, we don't embrace our ADHDers. We do. Actually, we celebrate it. But we always know everybody has areas where they can do better, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing. It's the self kind of, improvement, right? To move to like the best is yet to be kind of status. That hope, right?
Yeah.
That's where we want to move to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go on into all right, so I can support myself as an individual, but I could do with a bit more support interpersonally in the significant relationships that I have in my life, right? And I want to talk about personal relationships here. So could you explain could you like help us understand rather, like what is ADHD's impact on friendships, on relationships, on marriage? Like what's that look like? Like paint that picture for us.
I'm smiling because I'm just thinking about my own relationships, right? I guess I'll start with marriage first. Okay.
Okay.
I'm very lucky and I'm touching wood everywhere. Okay. I've been married 30 years.
Wow.
Survived so far. There have been many ups and downs, honestly. And how does it look in my marriage? Well, because I tend to be so interested in everything all at once.
Yeah.
I'm never bored. I'm always doing something, sometimes too focused on something. Like right now, I'm overly focused on unlocking ADHD. So then people around will feel very neglected. That they're not as important or they're not as loved. And that's actually not the case. It's just that we got so engrossed in something that we forgot, right?
Yeah.
And so I've had to be very mindful about making sure I have time for my family.
Yeah.
Because otherwise this can really disrupt the relationship.
Yeah.
And in terms of just general interaction, because again, I'm impulsive. So I could be having a very deep conversation about the meaning of the universe, right? And then suddenly I see a squirrel run past the road, say, hey, look at this squirrel, And, for some people, if they keep on getting stuff like that from me, they're going to think, you know what, she doesn't respect me. This is a very serious conversation. Why the heck she's talking about a squirrel? It's totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
Right? It's because for me, I wanted to capture that before it disappears and it's no longer relevant. I couldn't see that it's actually not relevant, period.
Yeah.
So my husband was interviewed recently and he described it as, like in the old days of the records, the turntables.
Yeah.
It's like skipping from one part to another, talking to me sometimes.
Yeah.
So I guess it seems very minor, but if you're in a relationship and it's a daily thing, right?
Yeah.
It probably can wear on a person.
Yeah.
So I've heard about cases where people are in a relationship, then it's a constant like nagging or reminding. So there's almost like somebody's third parent.
Yeah.
And somebody's more child. So the person who's becoming more parental, which tends to be the non-ADHD-er, feels a bit resentful that they have another child to take care of, and someone's not holding up their end of the bargain.
Yeah.
And the person who's being treated like a child definitely doesn't like it.
Yes.
It should be like two adults, right?
Yep.
So these are some of the challenges in a relationship. And I found that, it extends beyond just the romantic relationships, even to siblings, for example, right? Or housemates, right?
Yeah.
You're going to see the similar kind of dynamics. Yeah. And then in terms of friendships, I think sometimes we're so enthusiastic, we tend to overshare. Okay. So, or we get so deep into a particular topic. So we might end up bombarding people with it, right? We're not really thinking, do they really want to know?
Yeah.
Or are we just making a nuisance of ourselves, right? I probably have lost one or two friends, that way without realizing it. It's all good intentions, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I'm learning is to be more self-aware.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to circle back to something you said about he doesn't understand that I'm being very hyper-focused onto something right now. And I can imagine someone listening going, I thought they were struggling with attention deficit. So how come they can be so hyper-focused on something and so distracted about another thing? So they are obviously choosing, right?
Yes, that's a very common fallacy.
Yeah.
Because even the name itself, right? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right? Implies that there's a deficit of attention.
Yeah.
So that's why, especially for parents, they say, no, my kid doesn't have ADHD. He can focus on computer games.
Yes.
Okay. And what people don't realize is a misnomer.
Right.
It's actually not a deficit of attention. Some of the experts have actually described it as an abundance of attention.
Oh, unpack that a little bit more.
So basically, it's a regulation of attention issue. Okay? We don't know how to regulate properly, so that we sometimes focus on stuff that's not important, and the important stuff we don't focus on. So really, it's a priority thing as well, right? As I mentioned earlier, we're not priority-based, right? We're based on interest and novelty. So somebody, in an article I read, used the analogy of the, an intersection where there's four directions, like a roundabout or something.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And whichever the car's the closest to the front of the first one there would get the right of way, right? So with ADHD, there may be different things at different priorities or importance, right?
Yeah.
But whatever's closest to the face, right?
Wins.
Yes, we'll get the attention.
The squirrel wins.
Yes, correct. Okay. So that's something that we really need to catch ourselves on.
Right.
Otherwise, we can completely off track.
Yeah. I think that's such a crunchy little bit that you just said, that it's not priority based, it's interest and novelty based, right? So if I am the spouse or the friend, how do I navigate that? Because priorities exist.
Yes.
Yeah. So how would I navigate that conversation about priorities with a person who's driven by interests and novelties?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. First of all, don't fight your wiring. Okay, so I mean, like say my husband is a marathoner, quite a serious one.
Yeah.
So he has represented the country, but in a master's level. And for him, running is just do it, like Nike says, right? Just do it. Whether it's 3 hours on a treadmill or 3 hours on a 400-meter track. For me, it'll be just like boring as hell.
Yeah.
Okay? But he wants me to exercise. So we'll sometimes have fights over like me not exercising enough. So I think we've come to the understanding now that we have different approaches, but we all want the same thing in the end.
Yeah.
So it's being able to let the person get there the way they are wired to, but you're still okay on the outcome. So I do my running because I'm externally motivated. So I enter races so that I won't be too embarrassed if I do badly, So I want to just make sure I have that sort of barrier there. I get my friends to wake up and run with me. And I won't let them down. I might let myself down, but not them. So that's how I do it. And he's okay with it now because he realized that it's not just one way that works. Same thing, I think, for housework. Some people need to have everything taken out of the dryer, ironed, hung up, right? But for some ADHD household with no helper, they just leave the clothes in the dryer and take it out when they need to use it. It may not be perfect, but it works. So we have to find that middle ground of knowing what's really important and what's the thing that we want underlying to be addressed. And once we can align on that, then how we get there is less important.
Yeah. No, that's a great marriage saving and friendship saving tip, I think. But aside from that, so would another hack then be how can we make these priorities more new or more interesting? Is that a possible hack? Or
you can gamify things for sure, right? Or build in little rewards, when something is done. Or like I have a friend who's a couple, and the guy used to like leave his phone, leave his iPads everywhere and lose it, right? And then of course there'd be some conflict in the relationship. So in the end, the spouse said, look, instead of fighting over it, we accept that this happens. So to keep the peace, what she does is after they leave any location, she'll just look behind him. To see whether there's anything left behind and she'll pick it up. They don't have to get into a discussion about it.
Right?
Peace is there. They all know their roles and he also, of course, does his own part, right? But they don't fight things that don't need to be fought over. Pick your battles kind of thing.
And I'm hearing that even that small thing can't be had without acceptance.
Yes.
Being the first. I suppose that there is that difficulty, right, of like self-acceptance that I have ADHD, and then the other also needs to accept, they have ADHD.
Yes.
And it's not their fault. They didn't pick it. They're not doing it to piss me off.
Exactly. And I think you picked the right word, the word acceptance. Because we can have a diagnosis. But if there's no acceptance, the person's not going to move. Okay? Because deep down there's denial. Right? Same thing with the people around, right? If you don't fully accept the person, whether it's a child or the spouse, right? Or the significant other that has ADHD, there's still going to be all these expectations that may be unrealistic, right? You're actually setting the person up for failure. But that's a very big word and it's a very difficult word. But that one needs to be addressed, otherwise you can't move forward.
No, it reminds me of this paradoxical theory of change by this guy who he's famous in the Gestalt field. His name's Arnold Beiser, and his crunchy one-liners like change is not going to happen by us being someone who we're not, but change begins when you can just accept who you are. First, right? And his own insight came because he had struggles with his own disability, and he could not get over that hump until he first accepted it. Only with that acceptance, then he could start to reimagine his future.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a really difficult thing for, let's say,
for anyone.
Anyone, and I think in particular for Asian culture to swallow. What do you mean I have to accept this person as they are? They ought to do better. But that acceptance does not mean accepting defeat. It doesn't mean accepting failure. It doesn't mean accepting excuses. It just means accepting this is the reality that we are working with and we're contending with. And once we can accept that, then we can start to move forward with what what can we do next then?
Yeah, so when you ask me that question about whether it's an explanation or excuse, right?
Yeah.
So the acceptance means that yes, you accept that may be the reason for a person behaving in a certain way.
Yeah.
But the onus is still to move beyond that, right?
Yes.
The excuse part will come in when you say, you must accept me for who I am. That's it.
Yeah.
I don't have to change, right? You take it or leave it.
Yeah.
That's not exactly going to be productive or helpful, right, to everyone. So we're not saying take it and just leave it, right? We're saying take it, embrace it, do something about it, right? Yeah.
So what would you advise someone with ADHD to say or do to advocate for their needs and their wants in their personal relationships? Yeah.
I think it's not easy, honestly, even myself too, because sometimes when it's your nearest and dearest, the stakes are higher, and there's always this fear of failure, right, or rejection.
Yeah.
But it is important to set boundaries.
Yeah.
It is important to explain what you need, and how people can support you, and also to really give the context that you are trying, because sometimes when people see your actions, they may not know all the little thoughts and the little bits that came into before the final action.
Yeah.
To give an example, let's say my husband is free Thursday afternoons.
Yeah.
And he would definitely appreciate me spending time with him. And I do try to block it off my schedule. But sometimes when there are meetings and it involves more than one party, it's hard to say, nope, I can't meet you on a Thursday. So what I need to do to help my relationship with him is not to say, sorry, dear, I can't meet you Thursday. I have a meeting. Because that's all he will see, right? The effect. I would say, look, I know that you have Thursdays off. I blocked it off, but I've had this thing and I can't get out of it. I've tried. So I hope you don't mind. I have to be at this space at this time to this time. But maybe I can meet you before that or after that. So it's sometimes maybe it's over explaining, but it's to really show that the intention was there. Yeah. The awareness was there. Yeah. So that it's not just, oops, not available, therefore you don't love me kind of thing, right? Yes. And I think that's important, that communication.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's, in a way, it's not even about ADHD, right? It's about in all of our human relationships, there is a tendency to under-communicate. And what we perceive as over-communication is usually not over-communication. Maybe it's like talking a lot, but talking a lot is not over-communication. Like when I say like we ought to lean more on over communication, it means like lean more into articulating what's going on in your inner world of decision making, your thoughts, your feelings, because we all tend to under communicate that stuff.
But my husband will say, can you please do it in point form?
Not untrue.
So still, so I'm beginning to realize in this journey that everything is nuanced, right? Yeah. You can't just do a generalization and that's it. Yeah. It's a lot more grayish and different shades, right? Yeah. So it's really refining as you go along.
Yes. So if you are if I'm a friend or a romantic partner of someone who I suspect has ADHD, right? What does support look like? Like, is it okay for me to go up to them like, hey, you know what? I was listening to this podcast. I think you have ADHD. Can you go and download this thing right now?
That's very common, by the way. Okay.
I know, I'm sure. And that's why I'm naming it. Like, so you get a chance now to say, Moon, whether you think that's okay or not okay.
Okay, let's put it this way. It's practical, okay? It's practical. I understand that. But sometimes, again, there's something called rejection sensitive dysphoria, RSD for short. Wow. Okay, so that means that those with ADHD tend to be more sensitive to perceived criticisms. Wow. Even though it may not be a critique. Yeah. It could be just a statement, right? Yeah. So, just the example that you gave just now is very well-meaning. Definitely very practical, right? Yeah. But it could be perceived as, hey, there's something wrong with you. Yeah. Here is what you should be doing. Yeah. So it's coming almost like a top-down kind of thing, right? Right. Yeah. Judgmental. So sometimes there's going to be a pushback, right?
And someone saying, this is not a criticism, doesn't help.
So, I'm also working on it myself, but it's really to learn how to reframe it or rephrase it, right? Yeah. So it's not, this is for your own good kind of mentality or framing, right? But it's, hey, let's explore. Yeah. do you think this is something useful for both of us? That kind of collaborative approach, rather than you should do this and you should do that. So I think that's important.
Yeah. I think like in personal relationships in general, it is so hard to say the beautiful things sometimes, which is I love you, I care for you, like I want to walk this with you, it's all this like mushy sounding language, right?
Yep.
It's almost like we'd rather say that, can you just download this thing? Because I think it would be helpful for you.
Just chop.
Yeah, chop the bullet point form, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if like, does it help for someone with ADHD to hear that assurance first? That
You know how one of my friends brought her husband towards diagnosis?
How?
She knew that I'll be speaking at a webinar. Mm-hmm. So she said, hey, dear, let's support Moon. Let's watch it together. Okay, and actually that was my first webinar. Okay. And I like freaked, okay? Mm-hmm. And it was actually for parents of special needs children.
Right.
And because she was watching with her husband, and they realized that some of the symptoms were what he was experiencing.
Wow.
And then she said, hey, maybe we should check it out further. So it was a very soft way to do it, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes she basically let me tell him, right, via webinar, rather than she say that something to investigate.
Yes.
So that's why we are a lot into the peer-to-peer kind of approach, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes one is more open to hear from a third party.
Yeah.
On a very neutral basis than from one's closest and dearest, because there's so many emotional issues involved.
Yeah. No, and I like how it's framed as like, oh, maybe we should go and get this checked out together. Like it's not maybe you should download, you should check out, but like this is something for us.
Exactly. Yeah. And so in a relationship, really, it's two parties, right?
Yeah.
For the person that has ADHD, if they really treasure the relationship, then they have to take that ownership of investigating this. And if they really do have it, what are they going to do about it? Whether it's medication, therapy, coaching, lifestyle changes, right? Take it, right? And for the partner, it is to support by learning more about it. So you know, where is it that person, particularly, or is it the condition? Right? And so it takes two. So I think in our community a few months back, somebody actually asked, they were in a new relationship and the partner had ADHD but wasn't doing anything about it. So what was our advice as a community for this relationship? And there's a whole lot of people weighed in. And one common thread was, you know what? Are you able to stand this kind of situation now on a long-term basis? Right? Assuming that person doesn't change in the positioning. If they could, be prepared, accept it. Otherwise, get out when it's early, you know, that you still have a chance. Because if the person is not willing to change, then there's a very low chance of things improving. Right? And that's the reality. And that's why, again, there is data to say that there's a higher conflict rate, higher stress rate, and higher divorce rate. Right, for ADHD relationships.
So it does sound like it's not, I say it is a sobering statistic. It's also maybe to see it as a mindful statistic for those of you who are listening, and maybe you're like, I'm wondering whether I should date that person. I'm wondering whether I should marry that person who has ADHD. I guess it really is, are you ready to journey for life with the person? Because they are going to have it for life.
Okay, so let me jump in here too, right?
Yes, please.
Because, of course, when my husband and I fight, he'll say, oh my goodness, I'll regret marrying you kind of thing, right? In a moment of, heatedness. But then there's moments of like sweetness, right? Then he'll say, it's exactly why I married you, right? The fact that I'm spontaneous, I look at the world differently. That I add value to his life, right?
Yes.
New experiences and pushing the boundaries, right?
Yes.
So I think in a relationship, see the person fully as they are, right? The strengths, but also the areas of challenge. And are you willing to live or accept the challenges? I know someone else said that if you're going to marry a person, it's not the person that you marry, you hope they will be one day.
Yes.
It is the person now, in case you don't change, right?
Yes, yes.
You know, can you live with it, right?
Yeah.
So it's really the whole person, right?
Yes, yeah.
And if on the balance of probabilities, there's more pluses than minuses, right? Then take it, do your best, pray hard, right? But work at it.
Yeah.
I think my husband's a big fan of Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett, right? You know, he always quotes Charlie Munger saying, marry the best person that will have you, right? You know, so that's sort of the principle, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great reminder to look at the wholeness of the person that you have this relationship with. That, you know, like diagnosing, getting a diagnosis that you have ADHD can feel like, oh, suddenly that is the whole world, right? Like, oh man, this is all of me. Or you can look at a spouse and say like, oh man, like, what did I marry? You know, but it is a big significant part of the life, but it's not the whole part.
Yeah. And there's a lot of pluses.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah.
So it's really to see how we can have more of the pluses or the positives in one's life, right?
Yeah.
Less of the negatives, right? And how do you address that? Whether it's again through getting to know the condition more, whether it's medication, therapy, coaching, working together, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that if we just said, okay, you have ADHD, no, I'm not going to get into a relationship with you.
Yeah.
I think you're cutting yourself off from, you know, being able to maybe have a richer experience.
Yeah.
Both parties.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just to look at it with very wide kind of perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move this into the realm of like professional workplace relationships then, because I'm not sure that's a very public conversation about that. Like, how would someone with ADHD advocate for their needs in the workplace, especially if they're a team member or a team leader? Like, should they just keep quiet about the fact that they have it and like, I'm going to hope people understand me? Or should they actually advocate for specific things to be understood? Yeah. How can they advocate for themselves?
I would say we'll take a very careful approach.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that the best analogy really is a dating analogy.
Yeah.
You know, when you're dating a new person, you don't want to just expose all the skeletons in your closet at the first date.
Yeah.
You know, might scare someone off. You know, I would say give the person a chance to get to know you better and for you to know that person better, whether you want to proceed. I think at some point...
With disclosure.
Yes, at some point you would have to disclose.
Yeah.
But I would say don't do it too prematurely because you might cut off something before it's a chance to really develop.
Like, don't go into a job interview and say, hey, by the way.
Yeah, because you don't know what's the background of the person interviewing you.
Okay.
You don't know like whether they're so-called objective or neutral about ADHD.
Yeah.
You don't know if there's any previous bias.
Yeah.
You know, and you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. I think Dr. Edward Hallowell, who's one of the gurus in this area, a psychiatrist, we interviewed him last October, you know, on our webinar. And actually what Dr. Hallowell advised is don't go into it with that diagnosis name, ADHD.
Yeah.
Go into it based on your strengths and areas of support. Focus on the strengths. Right? That's a very, very specific, very practical, very factual thing, right?
Yeah.
Focus on that instead. Because people can understand, identify with that. Yeah? So don't paint yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how would, let's say, a progressive workforce, right, or a progressive team leader show support for people on their teams that they suspect might have like ADHD?
I think the first thing is that they should know a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
So they know what the challenges are. Some common challenges, and we call it executive function challenges.
Yes.
I don't know whether you're familiar with that term.
Yes, I'm very familiar because I have a child
Okay,
who's
very
been
good.
given feedback on executive functioning.
I had never heard that term until my daughter got diagnosed, okay? It's a mouthful, okay? So we call it EF for short, right? And I think the best way to think about it is getting things done. You know, like self-regulation, self-management, you know, performance kind of stuff, right? You know, and it covers things like, again, planning, organizing, right? Starting, finishing tasks, managing emotions, so on and so forth. So I think for the workplace, that's where the EF, the executive function, comes into play.
Yeah.
A lot. Same thing with academics, actually.
Yeah.
And one of the common EF issues that trip people up will be things like the time management or the sense of time. Which is why actually, you know, even now I have a little clock, you know, in front of me, right?
Yes. Say more about the clock and how that helps you.
Okay, because for those with ADHD, we really don't have a strong sense of the internal clock.
Okay.
So we have to externalize it.
Externalize time.
Yes, so I can look at it passing by, right?
Oh, because it's like the squirrel that runs past.
Not so much that, but because I can see it moving, then I'm always having that awareness.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do I bring it up in conversations? And I'm meeting people for the first time, right?
Yeah.
Is to just be very upfront about it. Say, hey, I have ADHD and sometimes my assessment of time isn't great.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'll tick out my clock. That's what I do to help me because I want to respect your time and my time, right? And I think most people are okay with it.
Yeah. No, I love it that it's framed as like, not from a deficit point of view, but like it is putting your need on the table. But it's to articulate it as something that the other person would value as well. Like I respect.
Yes, because you know what? If I just took it out, or like I take my watch out sometimes and put it on the table, you'll think, they'll be like, man, so Moon's weird. A bit rude, okay? Like is she like counting down to you and she can get away from the meeting, right?
Yeah.
So I have to explain and give context, right?
Yes.
So in the same way, because we know that we have issues with time, then in the workplace, particularly if one's working on a project, a big project, right? I think the support needed would maybe for the either the colleagues or the manager to sit down and actually break it out.
Yeah.
Chunk by chunk to have more milestones, more check-ins.
Yeah.
So make sure someone's on track so that if they're not, there's still time to sort of, redirect.
Yes.
Okay. And I said we tend to work from the interest or novelty.
Yeah.
The third way that we work, not always the most ideal, is the urgency. And that's why you have a lot of procrastinators, right?
Yeah.
It's because no sense of time. It's either now or not now.
Yeah.
Okay. So you have to build in that urgency factor.
Yeah.
Which is why we have those milestones.
Yes.
Right? To keep people on track.
Yeah.
So these are some of the, it doesn't cost much, but these are the things that actually can help a lot. Or like say for some ADHD-ers, they get overwhelmed with too much text.
Yeah.
So a very text-heavy document or message, right, can be just too much. Literal wall of text.
Yeah.
Just remember I mentioned about the point form.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's really to distill the most important things, right? Yeah. And then just feed it to them one by one and not like a whole bunch all at once.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So again, stagger or stage it. And also my husband always say, before you send something out, right? Read it, reread it, right? Can you shorten it?
Yeah.
Same thing about spell checking, right? Or typo checking. Because remember the issue about attention to detail, right? People might miss it because they don't slow themselves down enough to go and check their work. And they need to, right? So these are the small things that people have to bear in mind.
Yeah.
Or the fact that, when you're trying to give constructive feedback, that issue about sensitivity to receiving perceived criticism.
Yeah.
So it's really to frame it, right?
Yeah.
Some people say it's a hamburger theory, right? You start, with something positive, and then you say, and, there's this area that you're doing well, but how can we improve this kind of thing? And then, follow up with the affirmation, right?
Yeah. I've never been a big fan of the hamburger thing or what they also call the shit sandwich like frame, right? Because like you kind of know when a shit sandwich is coming your way.
I know what you mean. But so I think it's again the way you frame it, it's not the but.
Yeah.
It's usually your good but, It's more of your good and. That's how it's the end.
Yeah.
So that it's not like almost flipping the other side, right?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean what I'm hearing is I think it'll be if you are a professional working through your challenges or struggles of ADHD, and let's say you're not sure of the psychological safety levels in your org, rather than say like, hello, I have issues with detail and timelines, you can frame it in maybe more neutral org-friendly language, like something I've been working on is time management, or something I've been working on is detail orientation. And this is how you could support me through it. And it's a lot more like strong sounding, like I'm taking charge of my
proactive
thing. Yeah, but I'm not framing it as like there's this problem with me and you need to know this is my problem.
Yeah.
But frame as it's something that I'm working on and I could do with like support from this team in it.
Yeah, I think people appreciate it because if they see that there's effort being made, right?
Yeah.
Rather than someone who didn't care.
Yeah. And it's also to And the assurance I want to give to any professional listening to this and you have ADHD, right, is everybody at work has areas that they need to work on. That's the good thing about the workplace, you know. Like it's not good workplace etiquette to say, I got nothing to work on, you know.
Sure, and also we know that, you know, everyone at different stages of life will have different stresses, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a death in the family or maybe someone going through pregnancy or, you know, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So we all need to have that support or space for each other. You know, even so for those ADHD too, right?
Yeah. So what could be some of the surprising work-based superpowers that a professional with ADHD should, you know, be like curious and validated to say like, yeah, actually, like this is what I bring to the table. It's pretty good.
I'm a big proponent of a strength-based approach.
Yeah.
Okay, so I, you know, was introduced to the Clifton Strength Finder a few years back. And I tend to encourage our community to use tools like this. Yeah. Because once you can identify what your strengths are and, you know, leverage on them, you can get in the zone. Yeah. And that's where you do your best work. You know, you find that connection, that meaning, that validation, because the more you do of it, the more positive feedback you get. Yeah. It really builds on itself, you know, and for ADHDers, again, if there's something that interests them, they can just zone in into the rabbit hole, frankly, right? And almost become experts, mini experts in this area very quickly. So this actually is one of the ways that companies can really leverage on the ADHD wiring. Because if they can identify an area where that person is passionate or is interested in and is strong, the skills-wise, right? Yeah. Put them there. If you know that doing admin work just burns the energy in a very negative way, right? Yeah. Does it cost so much to get some help there to support them on that? Yeah. Let them focus on stuff that energizes them and they can actually bring the company maybe to a new product level, right? Yeah. You know, so again, out of the box thinking is something that is very common for ADHDers, the creativity. Yeah. I like to think of this as resilience or persistence. My husband says stubbornness, okay? But whatever it is, you know, sometimes when someone says, you can't do it, we want to prove them wrong. Yeah. Okay, so sometimes use that to your advantage. Yeah. You know, not so much opposing authority, but, you know, like they say that inside every ADHD is a social justice warrior. Wow. Okay, it's a nice way to frame it, right? Yes. You know, but yes, in a way it's true because it can be quite missional. So use that mission, that emotion, you know, get us aligned, right? Yeah. You get the best thing out of us.
That is such a gorgeous and provocative way of looking at it. Now it makes me wonder whether every social justice warrior is an ADHD.
I mean, I don't care, but the thing is, I know it works. Yeah. Leverage it because you know what? I think it can only make the environment better, or society better, isn't it? So whether they have ADHD or not, right? Yeah. I think we all deep down are looking for meaning. Yeah. And to connect with something that is purposeful, right? Yes. And, you know, even more so ADHDers. And, it gives hope. Yeah.
We're going to land this conversation soon. But one of the things that came out in the pre-setup for this podcast, like, I found it so intriguing that in your organization, and you run an organization, right? And because your nonprofit is all around unlocking ADHD, you attract people with ADHD, right? Yes. So what is the percentage makeup of people with ADHD in your organization?
That's a very interesting question. I think we are trying to find that sweet spot, honestly speaking. Yeah. I mean, we just celebrated our second birthday this month. Yeah. And definitely we're just, keep on refining as we go along. Yeah. I think initially we were hoping that we could offer opportunities for volunteers of ours who are predominantly ADHDers to come on board, as staffers, right? And help grow the organization. And I think to some extent that has worked well because we've been able to leverage the ADHD strengths. Yeah. But if we understand that in society about 5% plus, right, have ADHD and the rest probably don't have, then we're a little bit too heavy in terms of neurodiverse or neurodivergent individuals, right?
Yeah, your diversity inclusion issues are slightly different.
Yeah, just really to find that sweet spot because we have so many strengths.
Yes.
But there are also challenges that we have, right? So we need to have that really ideal combination of both sides.
Yeah.
Some of the neurotypical kind of structures and following process and all that, right?
Yeah.
Along with the ADHD creativity and the energy. So I think right now for our board composition, out of our 7-member board, almost half of us have ADHD.
Yeah.
Or we are parents of children with ADHD, which I think is refreshing because it gives a very strong lived experience aspect to what we do.
Yeah.
And the empathy is there. But remember, the other half doesn't have, right?
Yeah.
So that sort of balances out. So I think for our own operational team, we're trying to find that sweet spot of the best combination. Yeah.
Wow. I would love to circle back to you a few years later to hear what have you learned about just that trying to find that balance for your org, because I think that there'll be so much wisdom and insights in there to offer the rest of the system who's trying to figure out, okay, so how do we work with our 5% or 10%?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm still learning as a leader with ADHD, right?
Yeah.
Working with a team that has ADHD.
Yes.
And definitely, I think it's been also very humbling because some of the preconceived ideas I had, right?
Yeah.
May not have worked.
Yeah.
And also, I've also learned about some of the things I could do better as a leader.
Yeah.
And I'm learning how to understand everyone's wiring.
Yeah.
For those that are a little bit more inattentive, there's going to be struggles to overwhelm.
Yeah.
So being able to pace.
Yeah.
Because I tend to be hyper.
Yeah.
And high energy. So even my kids tell me, Mom, your energy is sometimes, too much, right? Too intense, right? So it's learning how to moderate my own pace. As they say, right? If you want to build a team, you really have to make sure that you accommodate everyone.
Yeah.
And you're as fast as the so-called the slowest member in your team, right?
Yeah.
So you have to, find a pace that is sustainable and achievable.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I'm learning as I go along, right? I'm the kind of person that wants everything done yesterday. But then not everyone can do everything yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So it's really trying to give that space to each other to make mistakes, but forgive, learn from it, and then, move on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I am grateful that you've had the courage to set up this non-profit pretty much overnight, right? You're only at your 2-year mark, and yet I think you have managed to attract quite a lot of interest and creating a lot of impact even within 2 years. And I think it says a lot about the superpower of a community with ADHD.
Absolutely. So it's not just about me. I couldn't get so many things done without the team behind me.
Yeah.
But I think above all that, I think the timing also is important. I think that, what we're doing now, along with, we started during COVID actually, right?
Yeah.
And, as we know with COVID, there's a lot of issues with mental health coming to the forefront. More openness of these conversations, more support, right?
Yeah.
So really it's a timing thing too.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm always believing in, the divine power, right? God, right? Above all. So I think it's really a combination of different things happening at the same time. And if this is the right time, then, we should really make full use of the opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, I just read the Forward SG report, right? Bits of it.
Yeah.
And it's giving me hope,
Lovely.
And the way that our government is moving forward, there really is going to be more emphasis on community-led initiatives, right? To make things like mental health support, healthy lifestyles, mental well-being, all these things are coming from the ground.
Yeah.
Because that's more sustainable. And that's exactly the space that we're in right now. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so on this podcast, we have a ritual where we'll end with sort of 3 fill in the blanks, right? So don't overthink it. Just go with whatever comes out for you, right? So Moon, what does it mean for you to be whole?
To be whole is really to be able to accept myself as I am, strengths, but warts and all. And be okay with it, to be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that, I don't do anything about it, but to be comfortable. It's not easy.
Yeah. No, it's not easy to be whole.
Yeah.
And what is a community that you are deeply grateful for who always makes you feel like you belong?
I think it's actually my running community.
Oh.
I'm not a natural runner, but we found that especially during the COVID period, I have a group of women that, wake up on Saturday mornings. And when we run, we talk.
Yeah.
We download, we rant, we just, comfort each other. We share wisdom, right? And so the running is built into it for the exercise part, but there's also the mental support, right? And the friendship, the bonding. Yeah. So I think it's really important to be not alone.
Yeah.
Dr. Hallowell said, don't worry alone.
Wow.
And I think it's important to have community. Yeah.
Beautiful. Don't worry alone. And the last thing, share with us like a song or a thing that is just very much a part of you. And what does that say about you?
Okay, I was thinking about that. And I think two things. I have to say two, not one.
Sure.
Right? Okay. So to me, the two symbols that are important are diamonds and butterflies.
Wow.
I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Diamonds because I discovered my 2-word purpose is uncovering diamonds. To me, that's the ADHD community. Diamonds in the rough.
Wow.
Diamonds are brilliant, hardy, valuable, but covered. Okay, a lot of work is needed to mine them. Butterflies because of the process of metamorphosis. I collect caterpillars and like to watch them become butterflies.
You collect caterpillars.
Yes, I have a lime tree that attracts butterflies and then I get the caterpillars there, right? And it's just the change, to know that, it's never too late. The transformation process takes time. It's beautiful, right?
I love that. Thank you very much for bringing your diamond butterflyness into this podcast. Yeah, I'm sure someone out there is listening to this and already downloading the kit that you have so wonderfully designed for them. Yeah, thank you very much, Moon.
Most welcome. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.